Well, we've got Cable in Space. Yes, it's Ten of Swords, number 8 of 22. Cable number 5. This is it's a part of the series. In the old days, this would have been like a tie-in, like the way Spider-Man tied into Inferno. But it doesn't mean it's a bad story. In fact, there's some interesting stuff being teased here. Let's get into it. Hey everybody, this is Perch. We've got Cable number 5, and this is Ten of Swords number 8. This is going to get a big mess here in a couple issues. At any rate, this comic is being brought to us by Jerry Duggan, Phil Noto, and kind of like the previous issue, the previous chapter in Ten of Swords. The art is really nice in terms of good use of color, some good style. I'm a bigger Rod Rice fan certainly than Phil Noto, but the coloring and the way the stuff comes together, it looks nice, it looks crisp. I feel like this is probably, this character fits Noto. I think that there's a good connection, I think, between what they're trying to do with Cable and here. And what's interesting is that this features a lot of space action, and it's rendered pretty nice. So, Noto is like, people like the art and like him or not like him, either way, but some good art. So anyway, this comic is primarily Cable and Cyclops and Jean Grey. And it's nice in the standpoint of, it feels like we're getting that kind of family adventure that we never really got in comics in any kind of way. And it was nice. So, basically what happened previously is that Cable went and Cyclops and Jean Grey went up to the Peak, which was previously the headquarters of S.W.O.R.D, then kind of became Alpha Flight during a brief period with Captain Marvel, but the Peak is like a big sword. It was rendered dormant at one point up in space, and we don't exactly know why. Now, we do know that Al Ewing is launching S.W.O.R.D, the book that is tying into Dawn of X as part of all this, and Cable is a part of that book, and definitely this feels like, it is written by Duggan, but it feels definitely like Ewing is setting up some beats here for that series. This feels like more of a tie-in to S.W.O.R.D than Ten of Swords as we get into it. But basically, they're up in space. They've turned back. They've used the keys. They've turned back on. The Peak space station is back and humming and operational again, but it's mysteriously empty. There aren't people there. Cable was given a clue by Saturnine, the Omniversal Majestrix, god damn it, that basically led him here. And so they're investigating kind of the curiosity of this empty space station. It's got kind of an Aliens feel, where is everybody? Nobody is here. So they decide, like any good science fiction horror film, to split up. And so Cyclops goes off with Cable, and Jean Grey goes off on her own. And she's got some background for her. She's going to go kind of figure out what's going on. And so basically, and then we do get a couple more of these data sheets, in this case for Blight Spoke. I'll be honest, it's very, there's a point to all this, but, as it ties into Otherworld and other things, but this is where those data sheets, because they've used them so randomly, I think throughout all the X-Men titles, long before now, that they struggle to have meaning. They're interesting, and I think in back reading, like when you go back and you read the comics like months later, I think they're going to have a lot more weight and be more interesting. It's where a lot of stuff is teased. But at the moment, there's so many of them, they're so random. I think it's an interesting way of storytelling, but I don't know that this is, I don't know. I struggle with these at this point. At any rate, while they're wandering around, we get the conversation between Cable and Magic that we saw already in New Mutants. And so she's like, hey, you got to get back down here and bring your sword. And, you gotta have yourself a little fight. And kind of like the previous issue, Cyclops is like, I'd rather fight. I'd rather you not fight. And they argue, they're like, no, it doesn't work that way. But, here it goes. And they come across this hastily welded door. So they blow open the door and they see something mysterious. But before we get to find out what that is, we flip on over to Jean Grey. And Jean Grey has gone to the airlock and she's found somebody. She's found our first kind of resident. Like any good horror story, the back is turned and he's saying, you turned the station back on. Why'd you do that? You shouldn't have done that. And then he talks, there was screams and then silence over and over again, repeating in our heads. Half the station was dead before we could regroup, half of them gone like they never existed, and they were the lucky ones. And he turns around and he's got a symbol carved in his head, and the eyes are black, and it's death would have been better. Which, like any good horror movie, death would be better. So Jean Grey's like, whoa, I've seen this movie before. And, the guy's like, hey, you have no idea what you've done. We were unprepared for the enemies who are not bound by the laws of physics. After we retook the science lab, we managed to deploy agents to the other side, but they never came back. They suspect it's a virus, but all the people who could confirm that are dead now. And so he basically lets her take a look into his mind, and it's bad. There's the mark they leave in the eyes, and it's just, how to train your mind. So anyway, she goes in, she takes a look and realizes the horror of the situation. Our survivor uses the airlock to jettison himself out into space and, in theory, kill him. And Jean Grey's like, well, we're screwed. Don't open any doors. And Cyclops like, I won't open any more doors. And that's not good. So, Jean Grey's like, it murdered everybody in the station. And Cyclops, now we get to see what they see. And they see this big kind of portal-y looking door, big black door. A lot of doors. Doors and plants. That's what the Marvel Universe is these days. Big, kind of black framed door, a bunch of dead bodies all over the place. The Cable starts saying, hey, why did Saturnine know why did she send us here? And he's like, was she trying to warn us? And Cyclops like, I love this. I love your optimism, son, but ask yourself if there's a more likely motivation. Like maybe it would kill us. And Cyclops gives us the just because you're paranoid doesn't mean they're not out to get you line. So anyway, bad news. It's real. What's on the other side? It's a faceless death. And then coming from that door are some strange kind of alien creatures who are kind of mentally speaking, kind of cleanse, dissect, learn. And, they invade, they replicate, they move on. And so immediately it's time to start shooty. So they start blowing up people, but then more come out of the portal, and they're basically coming out to destroy everything. So anyway, now we've got to kill the power to the station. They send Cable off to go do that while Cyclops and Jean Grey kind of poke around. She takes a little peek on the other side of the door and finds this kind of horde of army kind of pouring out of something, and they're coming for our reality. So that's bad news. And they're now swarming in, and they've got forearms. They look creepy, look like explorers, but we don't know exactly what they are. This is very Al Ewing of a concept. So Cyclops just kind of goes nuts and is blowing stuff up, and it's hurting the station. We really need to kill the power. Cable runs in, he uses a sword, he pulls it out and turns the lights off, and that good news. So we get another data sheet then at that point that is more interesting and relevant to this comic around the fact that kind of the timeline of kind of the Beat crew, 78% has been terminated, and kind of it goes into the horror of what's happening. That leads us to Cable, finally, with his sword, heading on into the Ten of Swords parts of this crossover. So the majority of this comic, like we said, about 20 pages or so of it are about the space station and the mystery. Does it tie into Ten of Swords? If it does, that's going to be an interesting kind of hiccup in all this. It doesn't really seem to fit with the rest of the story, but it does set up these other comics that are coming out of it. So maybe this plays into Ten of Swords, maybe not, who knows, but there's a big otherworldly threat that like a virus comes into our reality, and that's bad news. And maybe that sets up again the reason why S.W.O.R.D needs to return. Abigail Brand said there's threats that we have to protect the Earth from. This is a good example of one of those threats. What are we going to do about it? But we come back down and we have the conversation, kind of a mental conversation between Magic and Cyclops around, hey, we've and this doesn't quite fit. It's kind of the second half of the conversation where they're talking about a metaphor for rain, and she believes that bad things are going to happen as a result of this tournament. Otherworld is locked down telepathically, says Jean Grey, but I think if enough of us kind of put our minds to it, we can punch through and and give ourselves an advantage. And so that's kind of the tease from the end of this comic, where Cyclops is smiling. He says everything's going to be okay. He's got some confidence on. Not sure why he has some confidence on, but that's okay. Jean Grey is going to work with some of the other telepaths to go see if they can get into Otherworld another way, and that's our comic. So, like I said, very, very little of this ties into the tournament, other than it gets Cable from point A to point B with his sword. But there is some interesting stuff here around space and kind of how all these pieces are coming together, where it's all going to go. That part is kind of cool. It gives me some hope that we can see some pretty cool threats in the future, especially if they're finally going to deal with kind of S.W.O.R.D correctly. The weird part about Captain Marvel, when they put her into space and she was working with Alpha Flight and Brand and all this kind of stuff, and it was going to be kind of this protecting the Earth, is they never actually did a lot of that protecting of the Earth. They set up this concept that they never actually did anything with it. So if there is this concept of a new within the X universe, S.W.O.R.D and a team there that's going to protect us against strange otherworldly threats, that could be a fun little comic. It definitely kind of fits within Al Ewing's wheelhouse and could be interesting, as long as they don't then immediately derail its own concept and get into kind of other random things, So anyway, perfectly good comic. Nobody is eating in this one, so that's good. Again, this is we've got 5 people now on the little spots and on Krakoa. They're just going to hang out there, and we have 5 more to go. And yet, at the same time, we really have 2 more issues before we get to Stasis number 1, which is meant to be the assembly. So, I don't know. We'll see. A lot's going to happen in Excalibur and X-Men, it looks like. But it sounds like the next issue of Excalibur is really going to be all about Brian and Betsy Braddock and kind of how all that goes. And so maybe X-Men's going to be, and here are the other 4. And maybe that's what's going to happen. I'm not sure. Anyway, what did you think? Did you like this issue, hate this issue? Are you noped out at this point, or are you all in? Let me know your comments below. Like, subscribe, click the bell for notifications. But most importantly, thanks for listening.